Okay guys, I'm going to guide us through a watercolor painting project. We are going to be painting these lilacs here. So we'll do step by step. Now for this project we are going to need a sheet of watercolor paper. This step's optional, but I taped it down just so it doesn't buckle up with the water on top of it. And we're going to also need a pencil and an eraser and a few brushes. The brushes I'll be using is this detail brush, a small round brush, then a middle-sized round brush, and then a half-inch flat brush for some of the bigger areas. Right, it's good to have a big container of water and some paper towel to blot the paper. And I have this set of watercolors. You could use any set that you have available. The main thing we'll be using is some of this yellow, green, this kind of purple blue, different shades of red to make it more violet. All right, so we'll be mixing our colors in here. And I'll show a couple examples of our technique, right? So this is wet on wet. We'll be doing a little bit of this, saturating the paper with water and then dropping some color to get these soft edges. If you do it on the dry paper, you get more of a sharp edge like that. And here is an example of doing the wet on wet and then lifting up a little bit to blot the paper to get some of those white parts, which is helpful if the water puddles a little too much with the color and you want to have those white areas for the for this kind of thing, this effect here. When we get into the sketching, I'm going to show you guys, I have two vases here. So the first one I drew with pencil, and I went a little heavy and I didn't erase my extra marks. So when I laid the watercolor on top, you could see the lines. So this second one, I just took that extra minute and erased some of the heavy lines and then put the watercolor. So just so you guys can see, it's important to do that step if you don't want to see your pencil lines, to clean up the extra marks a little bit. So we'll get into the sketching part. And the good thing with the video, right, if you need to stop and get any materials, you can pause it, you can rewatch, or you can fast forward if you have some of the stuff already. For my vase, I'm actually going to use this circle, my tape, as a tracer. You of course can use tracers or freehand the whole thing. In my example picture, let's put that up here. All right, so we got this in the shot. And I'm thinking about my composition here. It's not in the exact center, right? This is off a little bit to the left and lower, and then you have these different clusters of lilac flowers above it. So if this is the center, I want to move it to about here. And this circle is going to be, about 2/3 of the vase. So I'm going to start by tracing this all right here. And right, the main thing is you want it to be symmetrical. I'm going to, so I'm just drawing, right, I'm going to draw a little heavier, and actually I'm going to leave my mark so you guys can see it. But when you draw yours, definitely don't draw as dark as I am, right? But I just want everyone to be able to see what I'm making. Right, so I have the line here, and then it's about equal width, about 3/4 of an inch both ways. That's going to be the base of my vase. And then this is the widest part here, where the round part is. And then it goes in again. And the nice thing is, I know some of this is going to be covered with leaves. So if your curve, if any of it looks a little bit weird, if there's an area you don't like, that's a good place to paint a leaf or cover it, right? And I'm just going to connect these lines here. Right, so here's my glass vase. So I'm going to cut this part in a little more. Right, and I don't want to draw too much detail with these flowers because the pencil lines will just eventually, right, they'll get in the way. And see if I can zoom in a little bit. Right, so in my picture here, I notice I have these 3 leaves here. So I'll put those guys in. We got one up here. And one guy over here. And then I might just kind of have these kind of pointy cone shape things. These are going to be clusters of the lilacs. One kind of goes like this. Right, and then there's one guy down here. And then a couple more here. Right. So now at this step, this is where, once you have the pencil in, right, I don't want too much detail, but once you have that down, right, you might take your eraser and clean this up a little bit. Right. I went pretty heavy, so you might see my lines even though I erased some of them. I'm just erasing. Okay. And then we've got these little crumbs on here, so you want to brush those away. It's always a good idea not to use your hands because you can get some grease on the paper, but to use a dry brush or a paper towel. Right, and we're going to be using this paper later, so you want that handy. And it's also good to have a little bit of extra watercolor paper just to test out some colors, right? Make sure that you have the right mix before you move on to your good version. And in my picture, we have a light wash around this plant, and it's kind of a yellowish color, right? And yellow and purple are opposites on the color wheel, so that's a nice combination, right? So I'm going to start with this bigger brush, and I'm going to just drop a decent amount of water, maybe 4 or 5 brushfuls right here. I'm going to grab some yellow like this, and this is a very bright yellow. I think it's a little too bright for what I want to do, so I want to make this a little bit toned down and grayer. So what I can do is I can add the opposite. I can add a little purple. Right, so I got that purple there. I'm going to mix that in, and that just makes it a little more like a golden kind of color. Right, and so I have this mix here, and I'm just going to get a little more water, and I'm going to start just going around this area here. Right, it's just like a very thin layer. Definitely okay to overlap a little bit. This is just to add a little bit of atmosphere around your plants and your vase. Right, so just kind of some quick, nothing exact, just some quick brush marks. And then also, since this vase is glass, you can see some of this yellow through here. So I'm going to put a little bit, right? So here's the center line. I want to go just a little bit to the left, and I want to curve the brush mark a little bit, just so it feels like it's around. So I'm going like this, and then I'm just tapering a little bit, curving it, and so a little more color, right? And then maybe there's a little bit on this side, and we have our background in. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to move on to some of these leaves. So I have some of this yellow already mixed right over here. Now I'm going to take some of my green. If you don't have a set with a lot of different greens, right, you can always make your green with blue and yellow, and just the amounts just can determine how bright yellow green or how blue dark green it is, right? So I have this color here. I'm making kind of this bright yellow green to start with, and this is a little bit of a wash also. It's not too dark, And I'm going to just go, and I just want to remember on my drawing what are leaves and what are going to be the lilacs. So this right here is a leaf, and there's a couple here. So I'm going to start with these guys. And for these ones, I'm really just painting on the left side because in the picture, right, there's really not a lot of color on the right side of those leaves, and it just kind of pulls across. And I'll do this in a couple layers, but for this first step, I just want to do it this way. I'm using this bigger brush still. I'm going to move on to the middle-sized brush when I get to the lilacs, but I just want to get a little bit of this green in here. And as far as brush strokes, I'm just kind of, I'm not painting across like this. I'm doing more of this kind of thing, like dabbing and letting the watercolor puddle in some nice ways. And this part here, I know that if I add the color to this green, this whole thing is going to turn green because there's some of the background is still wet. So I'm actually going to stop really quick and just grab some paper towel and lift up right here where this leaf is. So I'm just kind of blotting this and drying this part off. And little things like this make a big difference in how much you can control what your watercolors do, right? Just having this edge somewhat dry, right? We'll keep it from spreading. So we got this little guy here. Put this other leaf, right? And I can always add on to this later. So I've got these ones here, and I want to move on to the lilacs. So now I'm using this as my mixing area, so I also want to, before I put my purple on here, I just want to clean this off a little bit because, right, you don't want the green to mix necessarily with what color you have there. And I've got this brush here, right? I'm going to take, I got some of this nice blue, looks kind of like an ultramarine blue. And then I'm going to take a little bit of, I've got this purple color. So I think those would be nice combinations, these guys here. And let's see, so I just mixed a little bit of kind of half and half, the blue and the violet to make this blue purple. Then I've got this more of like a red violet purple. So these combinations are really all I need to make my violet lilacs. And when it comes to the brush marks, I'll show you on this little paper here. What you want to do is figure out what direction that cluster of flowers are going in, right? Like this one up here, they're all pointing kind of this way. So I want to angle my brush before I actually paint. I angle it this way, and then I have it this way, and I just kind of push down like that. And then there's one that might go this way. Right? So I'm just leaving these little clusters like this to make this big clump of flowers. And what's really important is to leave these little white spots because that's what gives the contrast, and then we could always build onto that later. But if you go too much like this and paint a lot, right, you just end up with a big gray area. So we want to avoid that. We want to have areas of dense color and space between them, right? And I like to use this kind of brush for that mark. And right when it gets to a certain point, if this one's too big and can't make the marks you want, right, you might switch to this guy, like a smaller brush for those kind of things. So we'll move on to our picture. I'm going to start with this guy here. And right, when you mix colors, you want to make sure that you're stirring a lot to get a lot of nice kind of vibrant color in there. And I'm going to start up here. All right, so I got this guy. Let's get a little more purple. I got this clump here. And I'm starting with just these very dense kind of dark areas, and I'm going to do the lighter parts later. Right, but these kind of go this way. Right, so I'm just paying attention to the angle and just mimicking that with my brush. Just get a little more things, right, a little bit up here. And what's nice, right, it's a clump of lilacs, so there's a lot of room to change it around a little bit. It doesn't have to look exactly like the picture. If your paints start flowing one way, I would say go with that and don't worry about trying to make it look a certain way. You know, just the basic rules to follow are that you have space around the flowers, and if they follow the contour of the vase, like this one, right, that will kind of emphasize the curve of the vase and the direction they fall. Right, I got a little bit right here. So now I want to mix a value that's not as bright as this, that's a little bit grayer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some water, make a wash. I'm going to try that out, and if that doesn't seem like it's doing it, I might add just a little bit of a yellow to this, right? Because then the opposite colors make the purple a little more. Right, so I got that there. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm going to add a little yellow. Right, just a little bit does a lot. Too much, and it might start looking like kind of a sand color. And also, another thing I could do, I could lift up a little bit. So that's a nice way to make a lighter value also. So let's see where we have here. So I'm going to continue with, I'm looking at this one. Right. Sometimes it's good to practice a little bit on the scrap paper till you get the brush the right, with the right consistency of paint on it, or the right angle, before you go on to this one. But right, there's no rush. A lot of watercolors planning ahead a little bit, so these little things go a long way. Like having a paper towel ready, checking the angle of the brush, you know, watching the edges. What I notice is in this picture, and I'm leaving this pencil line on purpose. In yours, you want to erase this stuff ahead of time. Otherwise, you'll see it through your picture. But what I noticed in the example is that some of these right edges, these edges here are very soft, so I want to have the paper a little bit wet, or you know, kind of paint into it like this. These ones have nice sharp edges here, so I want to leave these and leave white space around them as I develop this a little later. Okay, this one here I want to soften a little bit, so I'm purposely kind of scrubbing that surface a little bit to let this edge soften. And I want to watch this part here, because if it starts moving down into the green, then I've got to catch it with the paper towel. We'll see if it does that or not. So a lot of things I like about watercolor is the spontaneous stuff. It flows how it wants to, and then just kind of work with it and get some nice results with the like spontaneous, unexpected things. Right, let's see. So we got some of these this way, this way. Right here, there's a very pale, kind of a faint one. So let's do that guy. sometimes even just the water itself that has this little bit of purple in it gives a nice wash. Alright, so we could do that a little bit. Cool. And then this guy down here. And let's see. This part has a little more red in it, so actually taking some of this kind of crimson color and I'm going to switch this little brush for this guy. So alright, let's let some of that stuff happen there. Let's look if there's any more little accents that can go a little more red. I think around here. Alright, yeah, so you want a nice variety, right? This kind of range of red purple to a bluer purple to a blue. And let's see. Oh, my example picture's blown away. Alright, so we got a few of these guys. And alright, so it's come along definitely more than halfway there. Some of these things here. Depending on how much detail you want to add, you could always let this dry a little bit and take a little brush and just add some more of these kind of marks, like this stuff here, just to give that edges of these little lilac flowers. Or you could leave it looser. Just it really depends on the style that you're going for and what you want it to look like as a finish. Right. Okay, so we got these. I want to go into this vase. So I'm going to go back to this kind of middle-sized brush. And I want to get a couple fades going. So down here, from here to here, it's going to go dark to light. And then also here, it goes dark to light. What I want to be careful of is this stuff. So I'm just kind of touching this to feel if it's dry, which it is. If this stuff here is still wet, you want to either wait or take a paper towel and just dry it a little bit. Otherwise, all this stuff will kind of mush together. And I'm going to take a little bit of water, and I'm just going to go across like this. So I'm just wetting this thing to do kind of a wet on wet and prep this for the blend. Now I'm going to take a little bit of green and actually mix that with the purple color I have here. So we'll get a nice, like, kind of darkish green color. Right, so I'm going to do this part here. I'm just going to go across. And I'm leaving a little bit of space at the bottom. Right, so I have this little bit of, it's like a glass where you see the reflection. Right, so I have this part here. And let's see. Right, so I'm just kind of going like this. I might leave a little bit of space for these little white reflections of the glass to come through. Right, and what's nice is just letting the watercolor kind of do its work and let this stuff spread out on its own a little bit. So I'm going to leave that for now, and I'm going to take a little bit of these blues and purples, and it's going to go into here a little bit. And then this side, I notice there's a little more blue. Right, and when I brush, right, I want to just curve a little bit so that the marks all kind of build up and have that round. Right, maybe a little bit here. I want to leave some of these intentional, just the white of the paper for the highlights. Right. And then I've got the stems, and I just took a little bit of yellow. I'm going to mix some yellow to this kind of purple mix. Right, so we got this nice kind of golden yellow, and let's see, right, they just kind of go across like that. There's one. Maybe I'll leave a little space there for the gap. And I gotta take just some water, and I just want to soften this edge a little. Right, they felt like they were getting a little too sharp. Right, like in the picture, that's a little softer there. There's a lot of different ways to do this. You could use the paper towel. You could even just kind of use your hands and blot a little bit. The more important thing is that just get the edge that you want. So it's good to look at the example, maybe step back from your painting a little bit, check out what's going on, change if you need to. Right, so I just add a little more of that branch color down here. Let's look at this some more. It looks like right here around this petal I can kind of define this top of here. And now I want to go into these leaves again a little bit. So let's get some more of this green. I have my little brush. And I just follow in. I mixed just a little bit of a darker green. And right, so I'm just defining some of this stuff here. What I might do is get this in first, and then I guess take a clean the brush, and then I'm just going like this to soften that edge a little bit. Right, so it's a little bit more gradual than just this like sharp outline. Right, so I'm going to do that to all these guys. All right. And then some more of these branches up here, leaves. All right, so I'm just looking at the colors. I want this one to be a little brighter, so I'm adding some more yellow and green. Okay, this is where the paper towel comes in handy. I'm lifting up that color, and right. So actually, this is good. The difference between this color and this color, right? This color was getting a little muddy, and the purples and stuff were mixing in. So I stopped. I blotted the color up on the paper. I washed my brush, and I got some more of this brighter green and yellow because I want more of this kind of color in this one area. All right. Yeah, so I think that makes a big difference. And good. Let's get that. You know, I can kind of play around after the fact. I'm looking, I might want another leaf right here. Right, so you want to find this kind of balance of defining it, but not having a heavy outline, right? Right, so that is basically our picture here. I'll show you lastly, like this area here feels like it's dry, so I'm going to go with a wash, which is something you can do with a little bit of a clean brush and a little bit of blue, right? So I want contrast here, but not this much. So now I'm going to just go go over some of this. Right, so it still has that volume, but it's blending in just a little bit, right? You want to have that shape that you want. If you do this right away, there's a chance that these colors will just mush together. So that's why it was good to do this at the end. Give the paint a chance to dry, right? So now it's just you're building your range. So this is just a little more of, so it's not as flat, just like white of paper and then the dark color. Now again, some more in-betweens, right? And this step, you could just keep doing this and looking around if you want it to be very detailed. There's no rush in this kind of project. But I'm going to leave mine here. Just add this extra little bit of blue. And okay, so there we have it. Our example. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'll send this out to you. Okay.